On today's show, the Hawks pick up their best win of the season so far, taking down the New York Knicks at home behind a career night from Zaccharie Risacher, big nights from Trae Young, Clint Capella, and Jalen Johnson, as well as a strong defensive performance and much more in between. We'll get into all of what transpired, how the Hawks won this game, and more, and all that is on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1840 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening here in early November into Thursday. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can get a big return right now at FanDuel. If you're a new customer, get $150 when it comes to bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to tell you at the top of the show, as I always do on this podcast, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast. That includes, of course, places like Spotify and Apple. Plus, we are on YouTube. Please like this video as you're watching it and tell your friends about the podcast. And yeah, we'll dive in, for the most part, on this podcast to what became a really good win for the Hawks. 121-116 over the Knicks on this Wednesday into Thursday. And really, pretty obviously, the best win of the season so far for the Hawks in game number 9. They're now 4-5 after this victory. They entered this game as a 7-point underdog at FanDuel, which doesn't necessarily tell you everything, but as we'll kind of get into, the Hawks were, underdogs for a reason in this spot, but at the same time, they played very well. As we'll dive into later on, the Knicks shot very well from 3 in this game, and the Hawks still won the game, which speaks to how well they played in a lot of different ways along this 48-minute battle. And really, it was back and forth the entire game. The Hawks led early. They actually allowed a 14-1 run in the first half to lose the lead. Then they came back. They were up at halftime. It was a big night for Zaccharie Risacher, the number 1 overall pick. 33 points, the most points scored by a rookie in the NBA so far this year, and he was even better than that in some different ways. He was a huge story in the first half, really the entire game, and it was really tight the whole way. No one led by more than 8 points in the entire game, and no one led by more than 7 points in the fourth quarter. The Hawks were still, though, down 5 with about 3 minutes to go, and from that point forward, they basically played almost perfectly on the way to escaping with a victory here. So just an awesome win, and we'll dive into it from every angle. If you're a new listener to the podcast, first of all, welcome aboard. What we do here is kind of give you the big picture takeaways at the top of the show, then we'll kind of dive into the more minutia in the middle of the show, and at the end of the podcast, we'll dive into the player-by-player evaluations and how I saw each player that performed for the Hawks in this game, how they looked, how they fared, what it says about the proceedings in the future. So as far as the game itself and the analysis there, I want to actually begin with the defense, which might surprise people, but the Hawks actually played, I think, really well defensively in this game. Now, the numbers were not incredible. They had a 116 defensive rating, which is not good on its own without context, but I actually thought the Hawks were much better than that. For one thing, they only allowed a 116 defensive rating. That's actually quite good when you take into account that the Knicks made 22 threes in this game, and the Hawks were still able to get enough stops to survive. Now, obviously, there's a contingent of people that always want to say that three-point shooting is about the defense or whatever. Look, that's a debate that we can have later on. I've watched the game over again now as I'm recording this podcast. I watched all the attempts again. I actually asked Quinn Snyder during the post-game press conference about the possession battle and how the Hawks won that, and talked basically about the fact the Hawks were able to win this game while allowing this many threes. And he mentioned what I've been saying all season long, that the Hawks analytics are telling them that they are basically defending better than the three-point shooting numbers indicate. And I agree with that based on what I have seen. That happened in this game again. Obviously, not every single attempt was well guarded. I'm not saying that. But there were a lot of made threes that were heavily contested in this game, from Karl-Anthony Towns, from Miles McBride. Tyler Kolek made a couple of contested shots in this game. Brunson made 4 threes. Like, they have a lot of good shooting. The Knicks are number 1 in the league right now in percentage from 3. That's obviously a good sign that they're a good shooting team, but I would say at least 10 or 12, maybe even more than that, were pretty contested, and the Hawks were a little bit unlucky on threes today. But beyond that, they did all that, yes. They gave it 23 threes. It's not what you want to do, but I thought they were genuinely excellent everywhere else, which is not usually what we're talking about with this team the last several years. But they held the Knicks to 51% from 2 in this game, which is very good. Only 21 attempts at the rim in the entire game for New York. That's a great indicator of your defense. They forced 16 turnovers in this game. That's very good. They had a 77% defensive rebound rate, which is, just to tell you this plainly, if you don't know that number, that's an excellent figure. They were really good on the glass on both ends of the floor in this game. And they only allowed 15 free throw attempts. That's also very, very good. And I think having real length really shine in this game. It's something I've been talking about dating back to the summer about how the Hawks were really trying to this summer get bigger across the board, not just because of anybody in particular. They were really small last year. And I think of course, the investment in Risacher, having Jalen, of course, helps with this. Daniels is not this like 7-footer, but certainly is a big guard, to say the least. Adding more and more length. And even without DeAndre Hunter in this game, they were able to kind of get a lot of different stops in the fourth quarter. And I think, a couple of super long forwards really helps there around Trae Young. They had a 103.8 defensive rating in the fourth quarter, which is very, very good. And in the end, they won this game defensively. As much as that sounds crazy, if you watch the game, you probably recognize a little bit more than just the numbers, but they were quite good defensively in the fourth quarter to kind of turn the 5-point deficit into a win at the end. Offensively, they were also quite good. It was definitely a two-way kind of victory for the Hawks in this game. They had a 122 offensive rating, and it wasn't like they actually shot incredibly well. So they didn't have a fluky situation where they just made a bunch of threes. Like, it wasn't the exact opposite for Atlanta. But they were able to score at an elite level, despite the fact that they were good from three. 15 of 38 is very strong. 39.5%. That's a very good number, but it's not crazy outlier in either volume or accuracy. But they were dominant on the glass. 16 offensive rebounds that led to 27 second chance points. A huge, huge edge there. And another big one here, 8 turnovers in the entire game. That is fantastic, especially with 31 assists. No player on the Hawks roster had more than 2 turnovers in this game. That's a fantastic stat, obviously. And they did all of this, by the way. They scored at a really, really high level efficiency-wise with their starting backcourt of Trae Young and Dyson Daniels combining to shoot 10 of 37 from the field. And they still did all that. So, they overcame a lot. They played very well in this game. And I will end this segment by just saying this. The possession battle is not always the sexiest thing. I always make sure to note it when it matters a lot. And what that means is, when I say that, is that you want to take more shots than your opponent. Now, that sounds basic, but it means that you need to have more possessions than your opponent. That means the way to overcome that is if you shoot poorly or shoot just okay and your opponent shoots unsustainably well, you can sometimes steal a game by just taking more shots than your opponent. And that happened exactly in this game. If you just look at the shooting percentages in this spot, they were much better for New York than they were from Atlanta. In fact, the Knicks shot better from the field, from three, and from the free throw line. All of those in this game, and they still lost the game by 5 because the Hawks were truly dominant on the margins. And when I say on the margins, I mean doing the little things. Rebounding, turnover prevention, free throw avoidance on defense, free-throw creation on offense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The 4 factors is kind of the way that you always put that in the basketball world. The Hawks took 17 more shots from the field than the Knicks and 7 more free throw attempts than the Knicks. So 19 more shooting possessions in a 48-minute game than your opponent. And that's how the Hawks were able to bridge the gap and more to win this game. So that is really good process-wise, I would say, winning on the margins. And that means it's not like a fluke victory. Like, if the Hawks had come out and made 25 threes tonight and beat the Knicks just on that, it's still a win. It still counts. But as far as an indicator of the future, you would much rather, in my opinion, as a person who watches this team closely and has watched the cover the league for a long time, having being able to do this and win the game in a way that's not a fluke at all. The Hawks just outplayed the Knicks, very clearly in this game. And no, it's only one game out of 82. I'll be the first to say that. But the Knicks are supposed to be a really good team, and they were really good last year. They made all these investments in their big name players, Karl-Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, et cetera. That's still a playoff team on the other side of the floor here. But the fact that the Hawks did not need the fluke to win, in fact, they kind of overcame unsustainable shooting from New York and still won this game. And yes, it was at home, all those things. It's one game. But I thought it was a really, really encouraging night for Atlanta. And I'll leave it there for now as far as the big picture is concerned. But between Risacher's big night, between Jalen playing very well again, Trae doing the little things all the way across the board, Capella was really good in this game. It was a fun night at the ballpark, to be sure. And, of course, there are 73 more games to go. It's a marathon, not a sprint, to be short, across the NBA season. But the Hawks played great basketball tonight, and we'll dive in a second to how all of the sort of game unfolded along the way. First, though, a word from our partners on the podcast. Today's show is sponsored by Skims. We all wear underwear every day, but I have to admit that I haven't always thought about my choices in that department a ton on a regular basis. I know I'm not alone in that, and I'm sure there are plenty of people in the world who have not been switching that stuff up on a regular basis since maybe college or whatever. But for those of you that have not heard this yet, Skims is now offering men's underwear, and I'm here to tell you that it's worth the hype. They have classic cotton essentials for comfortable everyday wear, and also Skims has stretch options. They're lightweight and never lose their shape, plus a Skims Sport collection of lightly compressive base layers engineered to sit seamlessly under workout clothes for maximum comfort and support. Whether you're a workout warrior or just want to feel good every day, Skims has the options that you're actually looking for in your life. I can tell you this, the reviews look absolutely fantastic. You'll be feeling great when you check out the folks at Skims. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That's SKIMS.com, skims.com, and let them know that we sent you to them. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims also just launched their biggest holiday shop ever. It's also available for you at skims.com. One more time, check it all out now at skims.com and tell them that we sent you to them. Okay, we can dig in now to how this game unfolded, and I will try to be a little bit judicious with what I share because I have a lot of notes, as you might imagine, for a back-and-forth, close-fought game with a lot going on. The Hawks were actually up 7-0 at the outset of this game. Risacher hit a three on the first possession, which is kind of funny because Risacher has been doing that a lot recently, making a three early and then kind of cooling off from there. But the Knicks were actually 0-6 from the floor to begin the game. Defensively, I thought it was interesting. The Hawks actually had Trae Young defending Mikal Bridges to begin the game, which is not a huge surprise when you sort of realize that the Knicks don't have anywhere for him to hide. And Bridges is probably the easiest guy for Trae to defend. I think they did a pretty good job in this game, honestly. On Bridges, they had Daniels, of course, on Brunson. He did a great job there, as we'll come back to later on in the podcast. But it was, logical. Jalen guarding OG, Risacher on Hart, and Hart, by the way, is their worst offensive player, but Josh Hart is a fantastic rebounder, so it's probably better off to hide Trae on Bridges, which actually worked out pretty well, I thought, in this game. Rotationally for Atlanta, there were no surprises. Only 9 guys played for Atlanta in this game. It was the 9 guys that I would have expected based on the recent rotation. It was David Roddy as the first sub coming in for Jalen. He's been sick. He was actually on the injury report as questionable, and Quinn said after the game he was throwing up all night long. So Roddy was not great in this game, but he was able to give them some minutes, which Quinn was quick to credit him for after this game was over. After that, of course, it was Garrison Matthews and Onyeka Okongwu coming in the game in their normal roles right now with the Hawks shorthanded. And then Keaton Wallace as a backup point guard did his job in this game as well. Trae couldn't make a shot early in this game. I know I mentioned earlier that the backcourt was 10 of 37. Trae was part of that, obviously, but he did have 5 assists in the first 7 minutes of the game. And as this is actually a crazy stat every once in a while that I share from Hawks PR, but Trae now has 170 consecutive games with at least 5 assists. That is the 3rd longest streak in the history of the NBA. So it may not seem impressive, but 5 assists is not easy to get, and that's more than 2 full seasons in a row with 5 assists or more per game. Pretty crazy streak there for Trae. The second quarter of this game was absolutely wild. So most of the game was reasonable, I would say, as far as the offenses were concerned. It was a lot of actually kind of a defense-first game for 3 of the 4 quarters. But in the second quarter, the shot making was absolutely outrageous on both sides, not just the Hawks or the Knicks, both sides. Spoiler alert, it was 39-39 in the second quarter, which says it all. Early on, Garrison drew a 3-shot foul, and that's kind of his trademark move in a lot of ways. He made all 3, of course. He was fully flying up on defensively in this game as well, which I want to credit him for. Risacher had 2 big dunks in a row, one in transition, and the other one was actually really nice, in a half-court setting, through some traffic that was beautiful to see. They couldn't get stops. Both teams scored 17 points or more in 4.5 minutes to begin the game. Begin the second quarter. The Knicks were 6 of 7 from 3 in a 6-minute period, just a crazy barrage from them. And they had a 14-1 run mid-second quarter, in which the Hawks stopped scoring for a minute anyway. And with Jalen on the bench, the Knicks made every shot, basically. I mentioned this last night, and I'll plug this episode now. It's still relevant at this point in time if you missed it, but I did sort of a mailbag-driven podcast on Tuesday evening into Wednesday and discussed Jalen's season so far, and mentioned on that show that the Hawks coming into the night had a -17 net rating with Jalen off the floor. And then tonight it was actually even worse. They were -15 points with him on the bench in the first half of this game. And for the end of the game, they were -21 without Jalen in only 9 minutes on the bench. So they got annihilated. That was a part of that. And now through 9 games, they are 25 points per 100 possessions better with Jalen on the court than off. Wild stuff. Part of that's injuries, of course, but Jalen's been very important. Anyway, the Hawks are down by 7 at that point mid-quarter, and the Risacher had a personal back-to-back 6-0 run. He got a steal there on Josh Hart and then made a kind of a step back aggressive three, which I love that he took. He had 22 points by halftime. That's a career high for him, and it only kept growing later on. Trae had a couple threes late in the half. I would say it was unbelievable shooting-wise on both sides. The Knicks were 10 of 14 from three in the quarter. That's like a full game output, and they did it in a quarter. And I think at least 6 or 7 of the makes were contested. Like, they were tough attempts. And the Hawks made 7 threes too. So they combined for 17 threes in the quarter as the two teams. That is ludicrous. Also, the Hawks had 0 turnovers in the second quarter. So it was a offensive barrage on all sides. And here's a fun note. In the first half, the two teams combined to shoot better from three than from two. Not just percentage-wise, not just accuracy-wise, not just volume-wise, better from – they have more makes from three and more makes on percentage basis from three than of twos in the first half. Crazy stuff. Second half, much more under control, I would say, on both sides. There were a couple nice highlights early on in the third quarter. Jalen actually had a great pass to Risacher for a corner three that he made. Trae had a pretty unbelievable move and pass to Jalen for a dunk in the third quarter. And then another ludicrous pass on the final play of the third quarter, in which he definitely just swung the defense by himself with his eyes and then found Okongwu, who missed the dunk. The Hawks ended up scoring on that play, but that was a crazy pass that probably no one will remember at this point. But the pace was much slower, more turnovers, less shot making. The Hawks went cold late in the third quarter, only had 2 points in like 4.5 minutes, and they lost their modest lead as a result of that. But they were able to kind of hang in and be tied going to the fourth quarter, which is probably fortunate given how they shot it in the third quarter. In the fourth, kind of an ominous start. Jalen turned it over on the first possession and led to a run-out layup by the Knicks, but he got it back right after that on a really nice, like, physical drive and finish did Jalen through contact. He kind of flexed after that, and I'm sure Hawks fans love to see that. I know that was an encouraging sign for me that he was being physical and aggressive. The Hawks were able to kind of break even with Trae on the bench, which is definitely important. They got a free point when Josh Hart was called for technical foul, and this is one of those things that you only see in person, but they tried to sneak Trae Young, who was not on the – basically, Hart got a tee going into the timeout. Trae was on the bench. Then he came in the game, and Trae tried to go to the line, which he's not allowed to do because he wasn't in the game. And the refs caught it. I thought it was just kind of funny that they at least tried that. Risacher with the line and made it. Didn't matter, but it's just one of those little things that was kind of funny to see in real time. A smart thing to do, I would say. Offensively, it was a little bit uneven without Trae, as you might imagine. Keaton was kind of overly aggressive a few times. But when Trae came back in, it was tied with 8 minutes to go. So I won't go through the entire play-by-play from that point forward, but it was pretty much tight the entire rest of the way. It was kind of a slugfest. Risacher got a nice steal on Josh Hart. Trae had a nice steal as well on Miles McBride with 6 minutes to go, but it was still tied. Like, there were 4 total points in about 3.5 minutes to go from 101 to 101 to 103, 103. I thought Capella was really good in the fourth quarter. That was very helpful. Trae got fouled, I think, twice in a row, and neither was called, and he was not happy about that. That was, I thought, might be going to bite the Hawks because at the end of that stretch, Risacher missed a three, Towns hits a three, and suddenly the Hawks are down by 5 with 3 minutes to go. It's like, oh, man, they're not going to win this game. And then they did. So coming out of that, Trae, I thought, got fouled again, and then it was actually called goaltending alive. They reviewed it and correctly called it wasn't goaltending, but he was fouled. They couldn't add that to the play, so bad break there. So the Hawks had to get a stop. They're down 5 with 2.5 minutes to go without the ball, and they had to have a stop, and they got it. And then Trae and Dyson combined to set up a great three for Jalen on 2 really nice passes to the corner. He makes it. That was a huge shot in the game. Then Anunoby misses a 3. Risacher gets an incredible rebound on the defensive glass. High points it. Trae then finds him on a cut. He hits the floater, and he ties the game. So that sequence may not be remembered forever, but that was a really, really, really important swing in this game where the Hawks were down and kind of on the ropes and bounced back into it. They fouled Brunson with about 1:20 to go. Brunson's a really good free throw shooter. He missed one of the 2. That was very helpful. Then on the other side of the floor, down 1, Dyson misses a floater, but Clint draws a foul on the rebound, and Capella goes to the line when Brunson just missed 1 of 2, and Capella makes both. Not a small thing for Clint, who, by the way, is now 11 of 14 at the line this season. That's a small sample size, but still, those were big shots for him. Then the Hawks got another stop, and then they pushed the ball smartly in transition, and Trae finds a sprinting Capella for a dunk. Number 1, Clint was flying. I'm pretty sure that's the fastest that he's run this season. It's a reminder that I said this on Twitter, but Clint used to be, especially in like Houston and early Atlanta, very, very fast for a center. And at this point, he's not anymore, but he turned it up there in a big way. He flies down, He gets the dunk. And to my recollection, having been there for all the games, that was the loudest moment of the season at State Farm Arena. There was an eruption there. They go up by 3 points with about under a minute to go. It's not over by any means, but that was definitely a huge swing in their favor. And I'll fly through this again. Brunson misses a tough three after the timeout. Another great rebound by Risacher. Again, he was fouled. He makes 1 of 2. Trae gets the loose ball. They foul him, so it ends up being a 3-point possession. That was massive. Trae did miss 2 free throws at the end of this game. The Hawks have just been bitten by some bad free throw shooting at times this year at bad times, but I would say Trae's second missed free throw cracked the door open a little bit for the Knicks. So they're only up by 6 with 13 seconds to go. Brunson, of course, hits a 3 right away. Now, it took him like 7 seconds, so that was not a bad thing. And you're still up by 3, so all you have to do is get the ball in, get fouled, and then make at least 1 free throw. And they got it into Risacher. He makes both. Game is over, et cetera, et cetera. And to wrap it up before we move on to the player-by-player stuff in this game, it was 110-105 in favor of the Knicks with 3 minutes to go. And then the Hawks didn't score the next possession. So really, like 2:30 to go, down 5. The Knicks had the ball. From that moment forward, the next minute and a half was a 13-1 run in less than 2 minutes. That's how you win the game. And it came with stops too. Obviously, you had to score, but allowing what they did at the end of this game, the Knicks had 110 points with 3 minutes to go. They ended up on 116, even with the fouls and extra possessions. So great defense at the end of the game, enough execution offensively, enough free throw shooting, and then they steal this victory. So I have another page worth of notes that I won't do now. But the Hawks just made winning plays. And by the way, they closed this game. I'm pretty sure they didn't make a sub for 10 minutes. Capella, I'm pretty sure that was his longest stretch of the season on the court. He played the final 10 minutes of this game. Risacher and Jalen and Dyson all played 37 minutes or more. It was just they pushed it to the edge. They won this one. They stole it at the end, and a fun night at the ballpark. All right, we'll dive into the player-by-player evaluations in a second, as well as a non-update, I'll say, on DeAndre Hunter. We'll get into that in a moment. First, though, a word from our partners on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook and ready to tackle the NFL and NBA action this season with the folks at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you're a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel Sportsbook app is so easy to use as well. It gives you everything that you need to place your bets all in one place. And they have all stuff that you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads. They have money lines. They have player props. They have game props. They have future bets, same parlays, live betting, and so much more. The app is safe. It's secure. They cover the entire range of sports as well. The NBA is the focus of our podcast, but they also have NFL, college football, and baseball, and WNBA, and hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. They have also an awesome time right now. Sign up with folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel. The place to go one more time is FanDuel.com, and $150 bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we'll dive in now to the player stuff in this game at the end, and I will do a little bit shorter on this than I probably would have pregame because it's a good vibes podcast, but there is not an update on DeAndre Hunter. So I mentioned before, David Roddy was listed as questionable in this game. Trae was probable. Trae ended up playing. Hunter was questionable, which was different than the previous couple of games, but he ended up missing his 7th straight game. And pregame, I was not the one that asked this time, but Quinn was asked about DeAndre Hunter's status. And by the way, it was a very logical question. It was like, hey, he was upgraded to questionable. How close was he to playing in the game was the question. I believe it's from Jackson Cottle. And Quinn says, and I'm quoting here, this is the entire answer, quote, "You'd have to talk to our performance staff. That's what they do, and they're really good at it." End quote. That's it. So, number one, that's not an answer. Yes, Hunter's missed 7 games. Only 12 days or so not even 2 weeks if you want to be generous. But quite literally, and I'm not exaggerating here, I've been following this as close as anybody, they have given 0 updates or details on DeAndre Hunter's knee. It's only been the injury report. There's been no written releases, nothing from Snyder whatsoever, which just can't happen over this many games and this long when he's been asked numerous times. They've given updates on other guys, et cetera, et cetera. And just to put a point on this, and I'll move on, you can't, as a media member, I've been covering the team for 14 years, we don't have access to ask the training staff anything. Those guys and gals are not available to the media. That's not a shocking thing. Like, yes, could I talk off the record with someone on the organization? Sure, I could, but that's not the same thing here. So, and by the way, Quinn knows that. Quinn knows we cannot ask the training staff. That's kind of a ridiculous answer. He doesn't like to answer in specifics. I share that all the time. But as for the actual takeaway here, the fact that Hunter was upgraded to questionable coming into the game it should be a logically positive sign. Does that mean he's going to play on Friday? I don't know. But it's a mystery to me as it is to you, and that's where we are at this point in time. I always want to note that later on in the podcast that I would have earlier, because if this had been a loss, I might have talked about this a little bit earlier in the podcast, but here we are. That's the update there on Hunter. As for the guys who did play in this game, again, I mentioned before, but 9 guys appeared. No Larry Nance and no Mo Gay in this one. I know I answer this every podcast, but Larry Nance is just, they think he's a center. Very obviously at this point in time, I think. Mo Gay shouldn't have played, so that's very logical. David Roddy played 11 minutes in this game. I said it before, but he was sick. That was not a made-up thing. He was on the injury report. He was bad in this game. This is not his fault, only his fault, but he was minus 18 in 11 minutes, which seems impossible, but it's just what it was. He's not the greatest defender. Offensively, he has some skills, to be sure, but I will not. This is one that you kind of just let him off the hook. He didn't play well, but there you go. Keaton Wallace, 13 minutes, 7 points, had a steal. I thought he was not great offensively. He did have one three that he had off the dribble. He was a little bit overzealous, I thought, at sometimes offensively in this one. Defensively, he's been very solid, but unlike other games in the recent past, he didn't play with Trae, I believe, at all in this game. It was only backup point guard, which is fine. Keaton has done a great job. He's been very, very important for a guy that was supposed to be like the 17th man on this team this year. Him coming in and doing this has been very important with how shorthanded they are without Bufkin, without Bogdanovich, without Krejci. But he was fine in this game. Garrison Matthews, 9 points on 2 of 5 from the floor, 2 of 4 from 3, and the 3 free throws that I mentioned before when he was fouled. 2 assists, 3 rebounds, and a steal. I thought Garrison's defense was better than usual in this game, mostly because of just his energy level. He's always limited defensively, always. He's just always going to be with his physical skill set, but he was really flying around, particularly in the first half. I thought that was effective at times. And then Okongwu had a rough game. They were +5 when he was on the floor in this game. He did have 5 assists, which is actually a good thing, but he was 1 of 6 from the field, including 1 of 5 on 2s, 4 rebounds. He was not awful or anything, just didn't have his usual touch around the rim. And I think Quinn didn't say this. It was my read on the situation. I think that they might have been planning to go back to Okongwu. So Clint came back in with 10 minutes to go. And I made a note in my notes like, hey, they don't usually bring him in this early if they're going to close with him, which made sense. I'm totally fine with that. You can play the hot hand. Okongwu was more flexible, all those things. But Clint was playing so well in the fourth that they just rode him the entire way, which was fine. That's a flexible thing that you can do. He played well, and I thought Okongwu was fine. Just the passing was really actually pretty impressive, I thought, but the finishing around the rim less so. And defensively, he was just okay. To the starters, Dyson Daniels, certainly a mixed bag for Dyson in this game. On the positive side, I thought he was excellent on Jalen Brunson, and I said this during the game, and I don't think it shouldn't be controversial. I think Dyson is not just a good defender, but an elite one. And I don't throw that around casually. I think he's truly an elite defender. That was on display in this game. Brunson had 21 points, but they were not efficient, and I think a lot of those came when he was not being guarded by Daniels. He had 4 steals, which is not all of what defense is about, but he makes plays. He's still comfortably leading the league in deflections despite missing a couple games. He's been excellent so far defensively. Did have 2 assists and 5 rebounds as well, had a block shot, etc. Now, offensively, it was rough for Dyson. He was 3 of 12 on 2s and 0 of 4 on 3s. And there were times in this game where the ugly version of Dyson's theory comes into play, where even with the elite defense, his offense was a problem at times in this one. Now, to be fair, he's playing with Clint sometimes and not, some lack of shooting, all those things. That's correct. But there were too many times in this game where he was kind of just in between as a offensive player. They were trying to exploit the matchup and trying to have Brunson work hard defensively. That made sense. Daniels just didn't have the go-to thing to do. He was he was like short-running floaters, and he's a little bit trigger happy on those shots and not comfortable. I don't know if he was just overzealous or maybe underconfident. Whatever it was, it just didn't look good offensively. And the 4 threes or whatever, Quinn's always gonna tell him to shoot that. I have no issue with him at all taking 16 shots. That's fine. They are not exactly overflowing with creators without Bogdanovich and without Hunter, But it was not a great offensive game for Dyson. That's just fair to point out, even if, by the way, it's a credit to him that he was 3 of 16 from the field in this game, and I thought he was still a positive contributor because he was that good defensively and that important to a defense. Clint Capella was really good in this game. 18 points on 8 of 8 from the floor and the 2 big free throws at the end of the game in the fourth quarter. 6 rebounds, had an assist, 1 turnover. I thought Clint was rock solid. There were times, as there have been all year long, where the offense gets a little bit clunky with Clint. Definitely they're better offensively, generally speaking, with Okongwu or even Nance at 5. But the combination of Capella's defense, which was really good in this game for the most part, and the fact that he's been really efficient this year. Like, knock on wood and all those things, but he's been finishing around the rim effectively, not making the silly like hook shots that he's been guilty of taking too many of the last couple of years. I thought he was really good in this game, especially in the fourth quarter, and a huge part of the victory. I believe he's only, according to the Hawks PR, he's only the second guy in the entire league this year to have at least 8 shots in a game and make all of them. So there you go. Shouts to Clint. He was really good in this game. Who do I go to next? Jalen Johnson. Jalen finishes with a game best plus 26, 23 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists with 2 turnovers. He was really, really good in this game. And if you missed it last night on the show, I talked about him heavily on the podcast. Still relevant right now if you missed it. But in the two games before this, he averaged 25, 10, and 6. And then he goes up and puts in 23, 15, and 7 tonight. Like, he is putting up massive, massive numbers. Defensively, he was better in this one. I think I've been critical, at least somewhat, of his defense this year at times, and I stand by that. He was better in this game, I thought, for sure. Under control as a playmaker, attacking the rim, just really excellent stuff. And yes, the plus-minus is definitely inflated by his backup, or lack thereof right now. With Hunter out of the game, Hunter unavailable for the last 7 games, they don't have anyone approaching Jalen as far as like archetype even. Like David Roddy is the backup 4 right now, is not obviously the same kind of player. Hunter isn't the same kind of player as Jalen either, but he's always closer physically and defensively, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, so the plus-minus stuff looks better than it probably should, but Jalen's been hugely important, and they're playing him so many minutes, and it makes sense, and he's been really good in recent days. Trae Young, 23 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, plus 6 in the game. He was not efficient as a shooter in this one. He was only 4 of 12 on 2s. 3 of 9 from 3 is fine. Got to the line 8 times. Noting this, there was a question about whether he'd play in this game because he left the game on Monday with the kind of a weird injury listing. He was actually asked post-game by Caleb Johnson 929 tonight about the injury, and Trae said he had been sick. Actually, Quinn said pregame, kind of offhandedly, that Trae had been sick, and it was like, oh, when was Trae sick? Apparently, his rib issue was actually somewhat tied to his sickness. So Trae was talking about this. He was having trouble breathing and had like a cramp situation in his rib during the game on Monday. And I guess he had been sick all night is what he would said. So that explains some of that. It's kind of a weird situation, but obviously that bothered him throughout that game. And he was probable to play tonight. He played tonight. He played well despite the poor shooting. He did not shoot the ball well, obviously, but the passing was there from moment one. I thought he competed defensively the entire game. Did a pretty good job on Bridges. Just held his own for the most part. And it wasn't like he was incredible, but he kept the train on the tracks. They were really bad when he sat. They were good when he played. Typical stuff with Trae. He was good in this game. And then finally, I usually don't save. It's usually I end the podcast player-wise with either Trae or Jalen in recent days, but tonight it is the Zaccharie Risacher show. So Risacher finishes with 33 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks, and 0 turnovers. For plus 14 in the game, he was 5 of 8 on 2s, 6 of 10 on 3s. His only blemish was actually he missed 4 free throws. But other than that, he was fantastic. And he's the first rookie since Chris Webber. And I'm a Michigan guy. That was, I remember that fondly. It was 30 years ago. First rookie since Chris Webber to have these numbers: 33, 7, 3, 3, and 2, at least or better. That's crazy. And again, only 0 turnovers in this game. There are 4 guys ever as rookies, according to Hawks PR, that have scored 30-plus points in a game as a rookie with no turnovers. They are LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and LaMelo Ball. Obviously, LaMelo Ball is not Kobe and LeBron, but still, he's a good player too. So, doesn't mean he's going to be that, but man, what a game for Risacher. Defensively, he was really good in this one. Not just the steals and blocks, but he was active there. Rebounding at the end, I think I mentioned it during the play-by-play portion of the podcast, but he had 2 high point, really impressive and important rebounds at the end of the game. He was excellent. He really was. Like, it was the best game a rookie has played in the NBA this year. And you know me, if you listen to the podcast regularly, if you don't, points are not everything for me. Yes, it was the highest scoring game by rookie this year, but it was the whole package. The points are going to come. Like, he had been due. I think he'd been pretty much clearly shooting below where he should have been shooting in the first 8 or 9 games of the season. This is more of a correction to that. Like, he won't go out there and shoot 6 or 10 from 3 every game, but he was playing with confidence. The whole floor game was really good in this one. Like, you know, I'm glad post game Quinn said that his growth is not linear, which is something I joke about with my friend Robbie Callan all the time, dating back to covering the Hawks 10 years ago with him. And he's right. Like, it's not always going to be one arrow up for Risacher, but this is a reminder of what he can do when things go together. And I think he had already been playing much better than he was getting credit for coming into the game, just because he hadn't shot the ball well this season. This one, everything came together, and he was just excellent. And post game, he was funny, and he kind of swore in a funny way. Mikey Kreminsky asked about Quinn Snyder pregame, talking about how he's encouraging Zach to shoot. I won't play the audio for it because it's an expletive, but Zach in his French accent basically just says Quinn basically just says to effing shoot, essentially. Bleeping shoot, however you want to say that. Which is funny because he just said it so matter-of-factly, and he's encouraged by the coaching staff and by Quinn to basically go out there and fire away. And that's what it should be at this point. So great game for him. I won't go crazy about it even more than this, but like, he's the headliner of this game. Even though the Hawks won this game, that's the most important thing, is that they get a good win. But Risacher, number 1 overall pick, shined in this one. And that's, of course, going to be the national takeaway, I'm sure, and it probably should be at this point in time. All right, I'm going to get out of here now. One programming note. The Hawks are actually off on Thursday. Then they have a back-to-back on Friday and Saturday. First in Detroit on Friday, and then at home against the Bulls on Saturday. Detroit's been much better this year. They lost the first couple games this season, but have been playing better than that, and they are not the doormat that they've been in recent years. They lost by 1 tonight on the road in Charlotte, but that's not a terrible team. They're not great, but it's not a terrible team anymore. And that'll be an interesting game for the Hawks. Nice little test on the road. And programming-wise, I will not have a podcast on Thursday unless there is some unexpected big news that came down. I did the show on Tuesday. That was kind of an extra one. I'm actually going to Detroit, so I'll be traveling on Thursday for the game. So if something breaks, I'll be there. But in the meantime, I will have podcasts on Friday nights and Saturday nights. So no less content. I'll still be going six shows in 6 days or whatever it's going to be. But that's just to keep an eye on that. And yeah, I'll be back in for the game again on Friday. Please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. Please like the show on video if you are watching this podcast right now. And comment. Tell your friends about the podcast as well. Follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky and Threads, etc. at BT Rowland if you want to find me there. And also, if you want to support my non-podcast work, you can do that at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Thanks so much, everybody. A really fun night at the basketball arena for the Hawks in this spot on a Wednesday into Thursday. I appreciate you being here and listening as always, and I'll see you all next time.